Welcome to Slackin' Off with Brady Slack.
Welcome to another episode of Slackin' Off. I'm your host, Brady Slack. Today, I'm excited to have our guest on. I've known this guest for a while, not super personally, but he was a high school basketball coach at the high school I attended. He was a chain gang member for the football team on Friday nights. So you might tell everyone how bad I actually was at sports today, but I'm grateful for you. Coach Steve Galley, thanks for hopping on today.
Thank you, Brady. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. Well, this will be fun again because I took driver's ed from you. All my friends played basketball, and obviously we always hung out at the same side of the school, closer to the gym. But I was never super close with you, and I never really got to know you. So I'm excited to learn a little bit more about your coaching mentality, and then I really want to dive into what you're doing now, which is coaching not so much on the gridiron or in the basketball court, but coaching successful entrepreneurs. And I want to kind of highlight the differences and the similarities between entrepreneurs and competitive athletes. I know from personal experience, I get my competitive fix now from business, from building businesses, from being an entrepreneur, much like I did when I was playing sports. So if you're okay with it, I kind of want to start with your own personal competitive journey, if you will. I know you played in college. I know you coached a lot of different competitive athletes. What are some of the frameworks of a mindset behind someone who is a competitive, and how did you build yours to start off with?
Well, I think it was pretty easy for me. I feel like it was either already there or it was instilled inside of me from my father, who was really my first coach and mentor, and was just fiercely competitive. And he grew up in the Depression and really didn't have even close to the opportunities that I had to play organized sports. So I just know early on he and my mother, they put me in everything. I mean, I was in archery, wrestling. Wrestling was a total disaster. I was just a skinny little kid, and I liked the competitiveness, but it was just like, it'd be a lot more fun to like run toward an end zone, than to sit here and grapple on a smelly mat with, some other guy. And I don't know. I just always was really, really competitive, and learned early on that it seemed to hate losing a lot more than I liked winning, but I really did like winning a lot. But I would say, and my father taught me this, that just mindset is everything. It really is the starting point. And to me, it doesn't matter if you're playing basketball or if you're playing that one crazy sport where they won't let you use your hands. And I think they call it soccer. That you know what I'm talking about. That one sport where you can sit there for 2 hours. You can sit there for 2 hours and you might not even see a score. But to me, it doesn't matter if you're starting a business or even if you're a W-2 employee and you're working for somebody else. It really, any success begins with mindset. It's not just luck or happenstance. And so,
no, I was just going to say, so I agree. I think mindset's super important. Some people have the mindset, like yourself. It was instilled at an early age, and then you just continue to grow it. Some people don't have that. And what would you say to someone who maybe does have a poor mindset, or maybe one that's trying to build their mindset? How can they do so effectively to have some success, whether that is in sports or business?
this is a big debate in the world of personal development. Do you have it? I remember, I played wide receiver and coached wide receivers, and there was always coaches that said he either has good hands or he doesn't. You can't coach that. And yet I saw players that didn't have even good hands that ended up having good hands and could really catch the ball, but they had to work a lot harder. So maybe some people have a better have an initial starting line that's further ahead of other people. But to me, it really comes down to this one concept, and that is you can either react or you can create. And that is always in the present moment. So for somebody who is struggling with their mindset, it sounds so simple. It's simple in concept, but not so easy to actually do. But if you can get them to consistently just focus on the present moment and choose creation over reaction, they're the same letters, which makes it kind of a cool little exercise. But if you can just decide, okay, in this moment, I really get to choose my my thoughts, and it's by changing that thought in every present moment, they will slowly, gradually start to develop the mindset of a winner. I mean, Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. I mean, you're a guy that's you're in Auschwitz, you're in a Nazi concentration camp, and he made the decision that the one thing they can't take from me or control are my thoughts.
Yeah.
And I mean, so he just chose the entire time that I'm going to create something. And he basically created his story in his book so that if he ever got out, he was going to be able to retell that story. So I don't know. I also think I'm a coach, and I'm a huge proponent of coaching. And I just think, I mean, I have a coach right now, and I just feel like as much as we can do on our own, that having somebody help you with mindset is indispensable. I mean, you can read, you can create your own practices, but there's something amazing about having a coach that really changes things too.
So tell me why did you, we'll talk about the athletic coaching first. Why did you get into athletic coaching? What made you decide to go that route and choose that as a profession? What was the premise behind that?
Well, my dad was an unhappy lawyer, and I really he was. I really wanted to do I really like to do things that my dad did. He loved dogs. He loved the outdoors. He loved to watch sports. And so I
You would have been
grew up.
you would have been a great attorney.
Oh, but I would have been miserable, I think. So, I mean, he became an attorney because, as I alluded to earlier, he grew up in the Depression, and
Yeah.
he decided, I'm going to be a lawyer so that I can provide for my family, so they will never have to. I mean, he has stories of, he grew up in LA, and he lived through rationing where they were raising rabbits. They were raising rabbits on their property to eat because meat was rationed. And so he, but, and while he had a really good brain, he did really well in school, law school. Coming out of law school, he ran for office where I grew up, ran for prosecuting attorney and served 2 terms, and then went into his private practice. And it wasn't till later, I mean, this was all happening when I was a little kid. It wasn't till later that I really learned, mainly from my mother, that he was unfulfilled as an attorney, and it wasn't a true joy. And so he didn't put everything into it, which this was a great lesson. So he just always told me, you need to do what you really want to do, independent of income. And So that's when the next person came into my life, and his name was John Astorkia, and he was my high school basketball coach. He started as my sophomore football coach. And I can picture right now the first time that I was on a football field with him, and he was throwing me passes, and he had a good arm, and it was pure fun. And I just watched him, and I loved the way he pushed me. He was friendly, but he wasn't my friend. And it was like, this guy is taking me to another level. And then I saw it happen in basketball, where as a ninth grader, he invited me to come play with the high school. Where I grew up, you really didn't play varsity sports until your junior and senior year. It was very rare if you were a sophomore, and definitely not as a ninth grader, as a freshman. But he invited me to come play in the high school summer league, which was a mixture of current high school players and alumni. And he put me, first of all, no ninth graders were invited. I was so scared, Brady. I mean, I was petrified. I'm this skinny little kid, I don't know, 72 pounds, and I'm playing with, he put me on a team, which only people from my town would know this. He put me on a team with a guy named Dave Wetter, who was one of my, he was one of my childhood heroes. I watched him as a varsity player. I still remember the game where they were an unranked team, and they knocked off the number one undefeated team in the state in our gym. And I just remember thinking, man, I love this. I want to do this. I want to be a coach. I want to help players like Coach Astorkia is helping me. And so he really is my dad, and him were the reason that I chose to become a coach.
And you, correct me if I'm wrong, but you coached for close to 32, 33 years, did you not?
Yeah, actually 28 years total. I ended up teaching for 32 years.
Okay. And during that time, we talked a little bit about mindset, but what other attributes would you say good athletes, if you can go back and think, over 28 years of coaching, whether that be football or basketball, the good athletes, and they might not have even gone and played professional or even maybe collegiately, but the good athletes, what attributes did those athletes have?
Wow, there's so many. I think there's one that stands out, and maybe it's standing out to me because it stands out right now in the entrepreneurs that I'm working with. And by the way, most of those entrepreneurs are your age, Brady. I still refer to them as kids.
I am a kid.
They have not been. I mean, my generation, to some extent, has been beaten down and are really fixed in some of their mindset. And so the attribute, I think, is that they have an attitude that they can figure things out, and a failure, a so-called failure or an obstacle does not permanently stop them. It's more of I feel like we're living in a time where there's so much innovation and so much opportunity, so much possibility. And I didn't notice that so much when I was growing up. In fact, it was pretty much, this was the plan. You go to school, you work really hard. I'm still for those two things. You go to college, you get a degree, and then you do what I did, is you find that chosen profession and you do your best at it, and you do that for 30 years, 35 years. They have the little retirement party. You get a you get a watch. In my case, I got a nice wooden clock. It's a little clock. I was kind of disappointed. I thought, man, maybe I'll get a watch or something. But and then you retire, and I just see, I don't know. To me, it's just so cool the time we're living in. You can either be just beaten down by the gloom and doom and what a certain part of the population wants us to think, or you can try to figure this out. And so you see a lot of people that are gung-ho and move towards something that they want, and then they encounter resistance and they literally just quit and give up and say, well, I'm just going to take the safe, easy route. And I think that's why we have a lot of unfulfilled people. I mean, much like my dad, he took a route. It wasn't easy, but he took a route that he thought, okay, this is just going to provide security. And it did. But I mean, what price tag do you put on fulfillment and joy? So those best athletes, the ones, and they aren't necessarily the most talented physical athletes, but they have that mental mindset that no matter what happens, no matter what adversity, I'm gonna figure this out. I'm gonna try to find a way to get over this, around it, through it, whatever it takes.
And have you seen, I guess, because this is a really good case study for how long you were coaching and the quantity of student athletes that you would have worked with, is there a correlation between the effort and the grit and the determination or the work ethic that those student athletes instilled when they were in school? And is there a direct comparison maybe to the success that they're experiencing now in their adult lives, whether that be professionally or, with their families or monetarily, whatever that might be, but there's a success. Do you see the correlation between what they were doing in high school versus what they're doing now?
I think so, for sure. I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence that all of the clients that I'm currently coaching all have athletic backgrounds, and that I know it makes it easy for me to relate to them and for them to relate to me. But in fact, while you were talking, I was thinking of a couple of individuals that are one has a dental practice, and I look at him and his family, and they aren't perfect, but he's doing the same thing in his dental practice. Actually, he's an orthodontist. He would probably say that I showed some disrespect to him, but he's doing the same thing in his orthodontics practice that he did as a player, which was always just striving for a little bit more. He was always here's the word, curious, very curious as to, instead of just always passing judgment and then stopping, it's like, maybe I need to know more about this. Who knows more about this? Learning from others, learning from people that have gone before you, asking questions. And so I would say all of these people are curious, instead of just like, if I was starting now, I wonder what my life would be like. I knew I was going into the W2 world. And yet now I look back, I feel like I was always kind of an entrepreneur stuck within a cage. In fact, I feel it was my dream career, Brady. I loved it. I mean, I chose what I wanted to do. It was fulfilling. And 98% of it was, I was driving to that school every day, to that gym. And I was excited that I got to work with teenagers and I got to coach basketball and football. And that was exciting. But I wonder nowadays if, looking at all of the opportunity that's out there, I wonder if I would have just not ever stepped into that cage. I'm much more curious. I'm more curious now.
What was the 2% that didn't make you enjoy going to the gym or going to the school? I'm curious about that. What's the 2%?
Well, one is it's a big long word that starts with B, bureaucracy. The bureaucracy of public education, it is a huge bureaucracy. It's not that, in fact, the people that I talk to now that are in the corporate world, they are describing the same thing. And I don't want to disparage leaders or people that I worked with, but the bigger the bureaucracy gets, it just becomes a self-preserving organism.
Yeah.
And they do whatever they do to just keep status quo and to keep you. It's funny because isn't education all about exploration and curiosity and, moving outside of boundaries? And yet, because of I'm going to say this, sorry, I'll apologize to my dad, who's no longer living, but once the lawyers get involved, you just add layers and layers of red tape. And so I feel, in fact, I was having this conversation with another high school coach the other day. I feel like high school coaches are completely set up to fail. They're given a full teaching schedule, yet they are expected to run more than just an intramural program, and they are paid. The pay is absolutely ridiculous. You know this because I believe you were and I don't know if you're still coaching, but when you were an assistant, you probably, you didn't. Yeah, you
dedicated. It was charitable contribution.
Right, you were a volunteer, and at the height of, I remember when I retired from basketball coaching, I was still teaching. My neighbor came over. He was genuinely concerned, and I'm a total smart aleck, and he was asking me if I was going to be okay financially, and I was just kind of laughing, and I thought he was joking around, and he grabbed my arm and he said, "No, Steve, I'm concerned for you, or seriously." And I had to just say, well, wait a minute. How much do you think I'm getting paid to coach? And he thought that it was an additional probably 20 to 30,000 more than my teacher's salary. And I had to, and I said, "Why do you think they would pay me that much?" And he goes, "Well," and he's talking about value and worth and all these things. And he's an entrepreneur. And I'm like, now I really get all of that stuff. But he just
it's probably an extra $5,000. That's
well, at the height of my career, I got 3,100. And that's for to be the basketball coach that's in a 6A school, one of the largest class. And so that 2% was the bureaucracy. And I always had enough money for what I needed, but there's a reason why here in Utah, there's a reason why 90+% of the driver's ed teachers are coaches. And that's because that's to make extra money so you can stay involved in the thing that you really love. They have us. They have us by the throat. They know that we will work for that small amount of pay because we absolutely love it so much. The other part of the 2% is stupid stuff like taking roll. That just never. And over the years, I tried to find some fun ways. I tried to gamify it a little bit and have some fun with it, but no, that just kind of sucks.
You kind of mentioned this. I would call it a handcuff. They keep us around to do what we absolutely love to do. I would say that a lot of people are actually in this handcuff, this security. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some days as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, where I would love the security of a W-2. Some days just really kick my ass. But I see a lot of people that are in this handcuff and this security. And I would almost argue that nowadays it's risky to not do something on the side or not produce some supplemental income. Any thoughts on that? This is kind of tangent, but you mentioned something that I thought.
Well, I definitely see it in the whole new network of people that I've become acquainted with the last probably 3 years as I've transitioned out of education into, running my own thing. And that is that I actually feel very liberated. Very liberated. I heard this analogy the other day. I think it applies here. It comes from a Russian poet, and I cannot recall his name right off. Last name ends in a V, but he's a Russian poet that said a spiral is a liberated circle. And so if you think of being stuck in that same place, there is security in just going around in a circle, and you're just spinning, and you're just stay there, and it's predictable. You know that, okay, on the 25th of this month, I'm going to have this much money. I'm going to get this paycheck, and I can show up to my job. And I could have taught for another 10 or 15 years. They wouldn't have cared. And they wouldn't have cared if I was good or bad, really. If they'd come scrape me off the floor, one of the sweepers, coming to clean the room after school, hop on the walkie-talkie. Hey, Coach Galley's, he's dead. He just died in here, and you just get, I found I was burnt out too. Just going in that vicious circle. And if you think of a spiral, if you can break that ring, and a spiral is just a liberated circle, I agree with you. I think it's crazy not to explore something else. I don't know if it's wise to just walk in and fire your boss, and then walk out the door and say, oh, hey, what am I going to do? I have no idea what I'm going to do. This is one thing that I love doing with my current clients is they're just exploring their different options. I don't tell them what to do, but when you can create some clarity in their life and some experimentation. Yeah, I think people are nuts just to get locked into the I have to do a W-2. I have to do this career. I don't know if everybody's cut out for it, though. That's why I think so many athletes make good entrepreneurs, because they're already used to, like, it as a kicker. There's a few things in sports that I as a former kicker myself, it's nerve-wracking. It's like when you're in golf, all attention is on you individually when you go to make a kick, or when you're shooting a free throw, or you're lining up a 5-foot putt, to go into a playoff. So they're already used to taking risks and knowing that, I'm gonna win some, I'm gonna lose some, but if I keep playing, I'm going to win a lot, and I can deal with the losses. Yeah, I think some people would say we're living in just awful times. I think they probably watch the news every day. And yeah, there are some awful things that are happening for sure.
Yeah.
But I also think there's never been more opportunity. Like when I was starting out as a teacher, to go do a coach what I'm doing, like I'm coaching people around the country, and we just, like you and I right now, this makes it possible, this technology.
Yeah.
How awesome is that? And things like that were not possible 30 years ago. Now they are.
Well, so let's go into this just a little bit. What you left your coaching career, which I mean, by all accounts noted, you loved that coaching career. You did a great job. When I was in school, our school had some great basketball teams. You always went far in state tournaments. You had some crappy teams, but we won't highlight those ones. Um, what made you decide to? It was never when I was in school. We had a good athletic class. I will just say that. But what made you decide to then get into the realm of a personal development coach? Why that?
Right. Well, I will give you the short version. It really came out of what I would call my second burnout phase, where I I retired in from coaching in 2014, I believe, and that was mainly my wife had gone through a bout with breast cancer in 2011, 2012, and I just found that completely changed my whole perspective on everything. And I just found that, okay, if I'm not going to be all in, I'm not going to do this. And so I decided to retire. It was the right decision. And I just knew that I have like 5 to 7 years left in my teaching career, and I want to explore what I want to do. So I tried all sorts of things, and I just wasn't finding anything. And then COVID hit. And one of the things was including going back and being an assistant for one of my former assistants, who was a former player of mine, Coach Wilson. And I
Yeah.
really I loved being an assistant. But I could tell that this was not going to create the fulfillment that I wanted long term. And then COVID hit, and that really was just out of some chaos and crisis. An opportunity arose where one of my former assistants, Nate Crandall, who is now a business partner of mine, he we had just flown to Las Vegas and to watch the Pac-12 basketball tournament, and we were on the fence as we were going to go because the COVID thing had started. We decided, you know what, we're going to go. So we flew down, and within 9 hours we flew back, because once we landed there, it turned into a ghost town. We're watching the news. Everything started happening. Rudy Gobert in Oklahoma City or whatever, they canceled the game. So we hop back on a flight, come back home, and Nate, who I had got into running, I didn't really knew this. He never really told me, but when he left Riverton, he got into running because I was doing a lot of running and some triathlons and Ironmans, and he calls me up and he says, "Hey, we can't go to school. I'm training for this marathon. Do you want to go run?" And I really was not in that kind of a fitness level at the time. So I decided, but we decided to go run in the mornings. And I had noticed that he had been asking me a lot of questions that were just questions I had never been asked before. And I finally got to the bottom of it. And that is that he had gone through this training, and he was doing this high performance coaching on the side. And it just really was geared for somebody like me that was teaching sports psychology, that was, a sport coach. The mentality was just really good alignment there. And I asked him, "Well, how did you get into this? Like, why didn't you ever tell me?" I couldn't believe he never told me about it. And he said, "Well, you got me into this." And I go, "What do you mean I got you into this?" And I had sent him a book by a guy named Brendan Burchard, who is a big name in the personal development world. And the book was called The Motivation Manifesto. And I just read it. It's a great book. It's a cheerleader book. It's a rah-rah book. And it's written in declaration language, like revolutionary time language. And it's really, I love it. It's an empowering book. And I thought, man, Nate, he's an ultra positive guy. I go, this book is for him. So I sent it to him. So that's basically how it started. And we both now have one-on-one practices, and we've started a company that we're right in the middle of getting our first podcast episodes released, and online. We're creating online courses and content and thinking tools for parents of high school athletes and performers. So my way of now staying in the sports world is trying to help thousands of teens by helping thousands of parents. It's a missing piece. And kids have their sport coaches, but we have parents that are coaching their high school kids like they're 8 years old, and the kids just aren't having it. And so we're getting parents to think about their thinking. And so that's how I got into it.
I don't mean to cut you off. I always say that the reason for this podcast is mostly selfish, right? I am. There's lots of things that I can do to improve, right? And so I bring people on who have experience, or who are doing things that I either want to know about or want my clients or my audience to know about. I kind of want to go on this tangent, if you're okay with this. We'll highlight a little bit of what you guys are working on. I've got 2 boys, and I expect a lot out of them, even though they're 1 and 3 years old. And what are, when you say, parents are treating their kids like they're 8 years old, can you expound on that? What are you referring to? And then how should a parent, just, maybe the Cliff's Notes version, if you will, but how should a parent treat their kid? How should they parent their child? What should that parent-child relationship look like?
Well, it really comes down to the relationship and the communication with the teen. So when I say they're treat them like they're 8 years old, that's not necessarily, I don't mean that that's like this awful, terrible parenting style, but it's not very effective with a teen. For example, we have an athlete. We've done some beta testing, and with multiple teenagers and their parents, and we have a parent. I'm not going to mention any names here, but we have a parent who is really directing their daughter as if she is 8 or 9 years old, just constantly telling her what to do. And there's a real disconnect because she's not 8 or 9 anymore. She's 17, and she has an opportunity to play collegiately, but there's a disconnect between the style of communication, and this is all changing, by the way. She initially didn't really have a say, and their definitions of success were very different. Okay. The definition of success is you get a college scholarship. Then you have succeeded. Okay. And I would say that definitely can be a measurement of success. There's no question. Just like making a certain amount of money can, be a measurement of success. But her definition of success is different. And she had a miserable junior year. Miserable. Because her social life, academic life, everything was built around, you've got to get this college scholarship. And the parents were assuming that that's what her definition of success was. Well, this just led to so much pressure that she's not actually freed up to perform her best. And her whole high school life was going down the tubes because there weren't acceptable boundaries set for homework, time with friends. And I mean, we're wondering why so many kids are just anxious and depressed and freaked out, and everything was being posted on social media about her progress as I'm not going to name this sport because it might give give away her identity to some people, but her definition of success not matching with her parents' definition of success. And this is really where our foundational course that we've created, that's going to be launched within the next month, it's titled the Scoreboard Course. And it really comes down to the concept that what do you do if you go to a basketball game or a soccer game and the game's already started and you walk in, what is one of the first things you look at when you walk in?
Scoreboard.
You look at the scoreboard. I've got to know who's winning. I've got to know who's losing. Yep. And when you see the score, there's an immediate judgment that is made about the players, the coaches, how everybody should feel. And so if you can get people to create their own scoreboard. And it does include the desire to win. I mean, we aren't, our philosophy isn't, winning has no importance whatsoever. Let's just all go play and have a good time and hug each other when we're done. No, if you're going to get into competitive sports, there is a reason there is a scoreboard. But for our teens right now, one of the problems is their scoreboard is society's scoreboard. So in this girl's case, she is, her dad has his scoreboard. Her mom has her scoreboard. The player has her scoreboard, and there's society's scoreboard. And society says that if you don't win, you're a loser. If you don't get a college scholarship, then you suck or your coach sucks. And you've got to get good grades, but you've also got to get the scholarship. So that means you have to do this. And that means you have to sacrifice any time with your friends. And meanwhile, this girl, she was headed for disaster to where she wasn't even going to play her senior year. And she loved the sport, but just viewing, we're trying to get people to create their own scoreboard. And when they do, they actually will perform better. The relationship with their parents will become calmer, more peaceful, and stronger. And I would argue that she has a better chance now of getting that college scholarship than she did, going on that path that she was on.
I think that's good. Ed Milet always says winning is more fun than fun is fun. I don't know if you've ever heard that quote. And there's I have a hard time when people say, it doesn't matter who wins or who loses, or especially as it relates to sports, because obviously there's a reason to play. From a parenting perspective, I just have one other question to settle a debate. Do you believe in spanking your child when it's appropriate? That's the only other parenting question.
Okay, you're asking the guy who grew up in the early 70s, who was sometimes chased around my house I got the belt once. I got the belt once because I did not, this is pre cell phone days. I went off riding bikes we lived in a brand new neighborhood and we had lots of vacant lots and stuff. Anyway, we went off riding and I was supposed to be home at a certain time. And if I wasn't going to be home at a time, we, went to a neighbor's house or whatever, and we called with a phone that had a cord on it. And we called, and anyway, I didn't call. And so my parents had no idea where I was at. I did get the belt. I would not refer to it as abusive, but I did learn a good lesson. But my mom would routinely chase with the wooden spoon.
I got the wooden spoon a couple times.
Got the wooden spoon. In fact, I saw a T-shirt online a couple of years ago that said, I almost bought it, but I didn't want to freak people out. They probably would have come up to me and started trying to give me some therapy. But it said, I survived the wooden spoon. And only I mean, there's only a certain part of the generation, or part of the population, certain generations that would get that. But to answer your question, my wife and I never spanked our kids. Uh, and, but I did, okay, I got to tell this. I got a SWAT. We called them SWATs. I got a SWAT in school. I got a SWAT in ninth grade. And because I talked back to a teacher, I don't know why I don't know why I did this. I was not taught this way, but I talked back, and it was definitely rude and uncalled for and out of line. And the next day, I got called down to the office and asked if I said it, and I said yes, and had a little talk, and then I was told I was going to get a SWAT. This was not a surprise because I knew it happened all the time. You would hear it all the day. It'd be like you'd be at lunch and you go, "Oh my gosh, did you guys hear Brady got a SWAT?" And then it would be, "Oh really?" Everybody's fascinated now. What did he do? Oh, he did this or he did that. And the vice principal, he had a wooden paddle, and he lived in my neighborhood, which is even more embarrassing because he's like a family acquaintance. And he calls my dad at his office, and I could hear my dad through the receiver. And this vice principal told my dad what I had done, what I had said, and he asked him if he had permission to give me a SWAT. And my dad was just like, no hesitation. He said yes. And so, yeah, I remember it stung. It was like, I didn't cry, but that hurts. That hurts. Yeah.
That was the reaction I wanted, but I asked the question only because I feel like a principle that has been underlying in this conversation, whether we're talking about the athletic side of coaching or the entrepreneurial side of coaching, there's humans strive to, well, let me put it this way. Humans thrive when there is some sort of discipline, when there is rigor, they are tested, and when those things happen, they are able to surpass the expectation and overcome the trials to achieve success. In fact, there's a study that was performed that states that individuals who do experience stress are more likely to overcome a difficult situation than individuals who do not experience stress in that situation. And we talk about the discipline, and we talk about sometimes there are days when I would love the security of a W-2. But I would have to argue that I have seen myself grow more in the last 4 years while I've been an entrepreneur, while there hasn't been certainty, while I have had lots of stress, than I think I ever did before. And I think you would attest to the fact that whether we're talking about kids or we're talking about adults in this entrepreneurial situation, there is an exponential amount of growth due to the fact that we push ourselves. We expect a lot of ourselves. And I do want to take a moment to thank those who do put themselves into the position of a coach, whether that is an athletic coach for teenagers, who were probably as arrogant and cocky as I was, and those who are life coaches, because they do set the standard and help others achieve the success that I don't often think we can accomplish. Any thoughts on that? Any kind of remarks to that?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question that, I mean, I mentioned earlier that I have a coach. The reason why I have a coach is, as much as I think I can do certain things on my own, and I can do a lot. I believe in self-determination theory. I believe that we choose our path. I believe that those people that just live in circumstances and don't try to fight their way out of them, I think that's really sad. And you do have to be pushed. I'll go back to this girl. She is, if you looked at her, if you knew her, you would say, oh, she is driven, she is motivated, she is not lazy, work ethic is terrific. But why was she ready to crash and burn? The stress, it wasn't, her scoreboard was not matching her dad's scoreboard. And so it just created friction. It created, there's that fine line of having pressure. Like we could talk about weightlifting. Okay, there's a fine line between, okay, I am overloading my muscles and I am progressively moving up with the stress. There's a difference between that and then just trying some ridiculous weight and you get injured, right? And that's where, like, a really good strength coach he's going to minimize the chance of injury, but maximize the chance of growth. And that's what we're trying to do with parents is if they can get in alignment as far as communication and their scoreboards with their teens, the teens will actually, they'll get that right amount of stress. I mean, we're not talking about paving a yellow brick road for them where we just rescue them from every single thing. But that's kind of what her dad was trying to do. All of his intentions were good. And it came out of, this is what Nate, Coach Crandall, always says. All of this usually happens because we love our kids so dang much. We love them so much. We want, and I'm sure you want this for your kids. You're taking your life experience in and out of sports, and you want them to succeed. You want them to be tested. You want them to be challenged. But you also, like, let's face it, as parents, we would rather terrible things not happen to them. And so sometimes in our goal, in our intention of trying to protect them and keep them on this path that we think is the right path, in this case, getting a college scholarship, her dad's now realized that is not necessarily, that's a little piece of the puzzle. It's an important piece of the puzzle. But what about her mental well-being? What about, like, that you only get high school once. You only get high school once with your friends. And should she really be staying up till 1 a.m. so she can keep her straight A's and then also getting up at 5 a.m. to do extra drills? And you could sit there and say, oh man, she's putting in the extra time. She's putting in the extra work. Well, she's got 4 hours of sleep too. Tell me how that's going to help her. And so it really, here's another phrase from Nate. I wish he was here, actually. He'd do a better job of this than I can. He just always says parenting. I mean, the name of our podcast is Stop Parenting and Start Coaching. And he always says that the parenting is the hardest job and there's not a close second. Yeah. And you've just begun your parenting journey, and you will see that like there's no manual. We do the best we can. We screw up a lot as parents, but if we can create the right amount of stress and pressure, then they can thrive rather than, burn out in the friction.
Some days I wish there was a manual though, and if there is, I'm waiting for someone to send it to me. But no, I think parenting is difficult. But so is a lot of other things, and you can choose your difficult, right? So that, I think that's kind of an overarching thing. Where can people? I'm a fan of the coaching mentality. I think the coaching mentality is important. I think, having a coach is important. I have 3 different coaches right now for a couple different things that I'm working on and trying to accomplish. But where can people find more out about your guys' coaching services? Where can people find out about the podcast? Where, when will it launch? When can they listen to it? To kind of finish this out.
Yeah, probably the best thing is just to contact me on LinkedIn. And our website and the podcasts are going to go live We're saying July. We're waiting on some post-production things, but it might be the first part of August. But we are feverishly and totally joyfully in the midst of the work. It's truly been a side hustle. The parenting thing has been a side hustle thing for about a year and a half because Coach Crandall is still teaching, and so we've had limited time to work on it. But best place is LinkedIn, and when we launch our the name of our company is Create, Transform, Become, and it's also going to be blasted all over Facebook from our personal pages. So
good. I will link your LinkedIn in the show notes, Steve Galley. So again, Coach, I want to thank you for coming on Slackin' Off. It's a great conversation. It's been a joy to get to know you a little bit better and watch what you're doing in the coaching realm. And again, we appreciate having you on. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I do want to say, Brady, the first time I ever saw you kick, it was a home game, and I was on the chain crew. And this is a true story. I had no idea who was running out there to kick. And I remember saying, wow, he's got a good leg. And one of the other coaches said, oh, that's Brady Slack. He's a soccer player. And I was like, he's got a pretty good leg. So for your listeners out there.
I was a little skinny sophomore. That was the first time I'd ever put on football pads, and I had a great little career for me. So I appreciate that. Thank you. But for those listening, thanks for listening to another episode of Slackin' Off. If you have questions, concerns, or comments, please put them in the comment section. You can also find us on YouTube. Like and subscribe and tell us what we can do a little bit better. But again, thanks for listening and have a wonderful day.
Thanks for tuning in to Slackin' Off with Brady Slack.